Jed, and this is Prez. We made it! This is our final episode in Season 1, ranking all the presidents. And as you can see, we're unbiased. Don't worry. This is an unbiased ranking of all the presidents, but, you know, I thought I'd sport some of my bling. But let's get right into it. We've got 5 presidents, the top 5 presidents. This is going to be a little bit of a longer episode, but I think you guys understand. First up is James Monroe. He was our 5th president. He was a Democratic Republican, and he was president from 1817 to 1825. Now, James Monroe was I think our most Democratic Republican president out there. He was very good, and he's our highest ranking founding fathers president. Actually, fun fact, you know the Washington crossing the Delaware painting? Well, the guy holding the flag in the background behind Washington is James Monroe. So he served in the Revolutionary War, and he was very proud of him being a veteran of that revolution. You could already tell he was going to be a good president by how he was voted in. He was technically George Washington was voted in unanimously as president. It means everyone voted for him. And technically you could make the statement that James Monroe was unanimously voted in because he only missed one electoral vote, and that was one only cast for somebody else because they didn't like him. James Monroe's presidency was known as the era of good feelings, a precursor just to how good, his presidency was. The economy was good, relations were good. We were coming back right after the War of 1812, and we were experiencing an economic boom, and we were rebuilding and remaking America into a better America. The era of good feelings stuck to him like a nickname. And his presidency had the second largest addition of states added to the Union of any other presidency. The first is held by Benjamin Harrison. But I want to put into context that he was only our 5th president, and he's already added the most states, and that will be held until Benjamin Harrison. But it's a lot of growth. In addition to his addition of states, he also bought Florida, which became a large plantation producer that would help boost the economy of America later on when it started to pick up steam as a growing plantation state. His probably biggest accomplishment, and the one that he's most tied towards, is the Monroe Doctrine. Essentially, this was all of the Western Hemisphere, so North America, is hands-off Europe. So this plays a lot into the Mexican-American War, the Spanish-American War, all these wars we've been talking about and learning about. The Monroe Doctrine was the basis for them. And eventually that expanded to worldwide when it came to smaller countries having big countries pick on them, like Kuwait, and how Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. We instituted the Monroe Doctrine, stop it. Or Vietnam, Korea, all of these conflicts and all of us liberating smaller countries that were being picked on by the bigger guys was thought up by James Monroe. His whole idea of the Monroe Doctrine, don't pick on the little guy, was thought up by him. Closing out James Monroe's golden career as president is the Missouri Compromise, which is something he passed as president. It essentially added a free state and a slave state to the Union, keeping it safe. Now, at first, I agree, oh man, another slave state, we don't want these. But remember, he's only the 5th president, guys. This is very early, and we want America to stay one until we're actually strong enough to sustain a civil war. We're still building, we're still gaining our ground. So the fact that he opted to save the Union then was a huge and exponentially better decision. Next up is Ronald Reagan. He was our 40th president. He was a Republican, and he served from 1981 to 1989. This guy is my absolute favorite president.
But then, Jed, why didn't you put him as number 1?
Well, a lot of the good things that he did were, let's just say, they were conservative good things to do. So they were very good things for the nation, and they were great things that he had done. But some people disagree with them in the moment, and some people still disagree with them today. The beginning of Ronald Reagan's presidency was mostly about the economy being built. That was his whole thing coming in, that he was going to be an economy rebuilding president. I'm going to put it into context. Remember Jimmy Carter way back in one of our earlier episodes? Yeah, we're coming right after that. inflation is high, unemployment is high, gas prices are skyrocketing. And Ronald Reagan comes in there, he drops taxes, which are very high at this point, and he tries to drop government spending to stop the inflation and influx of unemployment. And it ends up working. It turns out that, as his presidency progresses and he makes more adjustments, the unemployment is lowering and inflation is lowering, but there is one small side effect of this. That one little mishap was the federal deficit. Essentially, the deficit is how much the government is spending that it's not earning. So it's essentially how much we're adding to the national debt. And that was fairly high during Ronald Reagan's presidency, but it was kind of a give and take, because when you think about it, the economy was in horrible conditions and Americans were in horrible, conditions and environments because of the low employment, the super slow economy, and the high inflation. Because of this, Ronald Reagan had to had to change things. And because he lowered spending and lowered taxes but raised spending on defense, there ended up being a little bit of there's some debt still because of this. But I think the raising of the economy and stimulating it and putting us in a much better place economically was more important. Another good thing he did, but is still debated, is the invasion of Grenada. So essentially, Grenada was an island that had a medical school that a lot of American students were going to. But the government toppled and became communist, and the Americans there were very scared that they could get hurt because the communists didn't like Americans. Because of this, Ronald Reagan invaded Grenada, and we had very few American casualties, and we were able to get everyone out of Grenada and reinstitute a democratic government. I think that this was an awesome move to make, and it saved a lot of lives, and it reinstituted a government there that should be there. Some people didn't like it because it kind of felt like we were being too military involved, but I think it was a place where lives were at stake, and Ronald Reagan made the right move. Another amazing thing, probably the best accomplishment of Ronald Reagan, was ending the Cold War. This was ginormous. Just like I told you, you might get a little confused because George H.W., it ended when George H.W. Bush was president, but it was really Ronald Reagan's pulling the strings that ended our icy conflict with the Soviet Union. So essentially, the Soviet Union had a long line of very stern and very harsh rulers. But when Mikhail Gorbachev took control of the Soviet Union, he was more open to negotiations. And Ronald Reagan was very open to negotiations. And so they were able to form a friendship and get rid of countless nuclear weapons that was able to ease the tensions and eventually end the Soviet Union's oppressive rule. Another major accomplishment and major thing that Ronald Reagan strived for was equal rights, especially in the Supreme Court. Ronald Reagan appointed the first female Supreme Court judge, and he appointed the first Italian Supreme Court judge. These were huge milestones and huge steps towards complete and total equality. And Ronald Reagan was very proud of these accomplishments, as he should be, because they paved the way for more appointments like this in the near future. Well, that's my favorite president, Ronald Reagan. Comment below on your favorite president. But we're not done yet. We've still got 3 more presidents. Stay tuned. Next up is Abraham Lincoln, our 16th president. He was a Republican. He served from 1861 to 1865. He has 2 major accomplishments, but they are some of the biggest accomplishments any president has ever dreamed of. They're ending slavery and winning the Civil War. Let's break these up into 2 different sections, though, in order to fully understand the gravity and how much these actual events and accomplishments meant to his presidency. The first one, in chronological order, is the Civil War, a fight between the states. At first, it was solely about states' rights, but it really evolved to in what the conflict had been all along, which was slavery. It was really hard for Abraham Lincoln to lead this kind of war because it was brother against brother. It was North against South. It was really tough for him just because the magnitude of this kind of event. But he led it with he led it very well. He was a very strong leader and a very smart one too. He not only helped with government strategies, military strategies, but also the early rebuilding after the war had been won. He won this war and he did it well. The next and probably more significant accomplishment was the abolishing of slavery. This was really tough. This took a lot because, that he had to do it before the states came back together. We had already won the war and they were surrendering, but he had to pass the civil rights, the ending of slavery amendment before they came back, because if they came back, their congressman would be in there, they would be in Congress, they would be able to vote against it, and it all would have been for naught. So Abraham Lincoln worked very hard to get it passed before the war ended, and he worked very hard for them to keep those rights too. The sad truth is, because of the horrible nature of Reconstruction, even though slavery had ended, that kind of rebuilding that really needed to happen about restoring their rights didn't. Some count Abraham Lincoln as a monarch or a tyrannical monarch because he took a lot of liberties, like the Emancipation Proclamation freeing all slaves in the Confederacy, that he didn't actually have but needed to be done. He was doing the right thing, but sadly, sometimes the Constitution got in his way. Whether he had these rights or not, we can all agree that what he was doing was correct. Abraham Lincoln was an American hero that will be remembered for years, forever, years to come. Next up, we're coming to the home stretch, is Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I'll refer to him as FDR, as most people do. He was our 32nd president. He was a Democrat, and he served from 1933 to 1945. He is our longest-serving president. He was elected to 4 terms. That's nuts. That's crazy. The most any other as president has done is 2, but he was elected to 4 terms. He died early in his 4th term, so we really only had 3, but he was elected to that 4th one, and that's huge. We now have a constitutional amendment prohibiting that, but at the time it was totally okay. Just like Abraham Lincoln, I'm breaking him into 2 sections, not bad and good, but the Great Depression and World War II. For those who have been watching these in order, you remember Herbert Hoover way back there in the Great Depression. Well, FDR was the one who took hold after Herbert Hoover and tried to fix stuff. While the Great Depression went much deeper than government programs, FDR pushed for more government programs and more government policies so that more jobs would be made that the government could have. So building bridges or building dams or building, parks and whatnot, park benches. That's giving people jobs and it's giving them pay. And a lot of those programs, like soup kitchens, not only gave work to the people running the soup kitchens, but they were providing help to the people who needed them. So FDR's many policies and government intervention was really needed here, and it was really appreciated. The way FDR handled the Great Depression was very good, and it was the most he could do. But really, World War II was what ended the Great Depression, not government intervention. Even though it helped, it really was the men being able to find work as soldiers and the women working very hard in the factories that brought us back to production very well. And he was one of our greatest wartime presidents. Maybe our best, but that's a hard space to fill. He had amazing leadership throughout World War II, leading the stride and helping us to win the war for the Allies. He led a great example, and through radio, he was able to inspire and help others who were going through this hard time with them. He had strong leadership, and he was a good person to lead on in times of trouble. While other accomplishments like starting Social Security don't get much light, he was a great leader who did what America really needed. He helped to end the Great Depression and helped to win World War II. Sadly, he wasn't able to see it and died just a few weeks before the war ended. All right, drum roll, we're waiting. Who's the best president according to Prez? It's Dwight D. Eisenhower. He was our 34th president, a Republican, and was our president from 1953 to 1961. He was an incredible president, and it's going to take me a while to list all of his accomplishments. And while some may be surprised with this verdict, I think I'll be able to win you over. Dwight D. Eisenhower was a general, much like Zachary Taylor, Ulysses S. Grant, George Washington. But he was one of the best generals in American history. He was the head general for all U.S. Allied forces in World War II. And while he was he was an amazing general leading D-Day, he ended the Korean War. Let's stop and this is the first of many amazing accomplishments. Let's sit back and look at this. So we're in Korea. We're nearing where, I think we're probably in here too long, because Truman, towards the end of Truman's term, we were seeing that we should probably get our boys out there. And Dwight D. Eisenhower was able to negotiate our men getting out of Korea, but he was also able to negotiate a border so that North Korea and South Korea could be independent governments, one being democratic and one being communist. But just because he pulled us out of the Korean War doesn't mean he stopped being a hard opponent of communism. He was always fighting, he was always a hero of the Cold War, but he was the first president to take the Cold War, not just the arms race, but the space race as well. That's right, not only did Dwight D. Eisenhower take us out of the Korean War, he started NASA. In response to Sputnik being launched by the Russians into space, starting the space race, Eisenhower thought to himself, let's us make spaceships too. So it was Dwight D. Eisenhower who pioneered and started NASA. That's right. He started us getting in the space race, showing that we can beat you with weapons and we can beat you with spaceships too. While making NASA, he made a bunch of other scientific programs and offices, which led to the government creating the internet. Yeah, that's right. He ended the Korean War. He started NASA, and he started studies into what would lead to making the internet. But wait, there's more. He was president during the 1950s. We had just switched from World War II wartime to us switching back to normalcy. And now that the factories that used to be making bombs and airplanes are making TV sets, we are in the biggest economic boom and prosperity of all time in American history. And he's leading the charge on this. We're good right now economically, and he's leading this. He's the president during this. He's watching over this. He's making sure this is working and happening. So thanks, Eisenhower. You're doing a great job. But wait, there's even more. Okay, this is one of his biggest as well, but they're all huge. Another amazing accomplishment of the Eisenhower administration was Little Rock, Arkansas. So segregation is still around when President Eisenhower is president, but he doesn't like that. He knows that all Americans are created equal. So Little Rock, Arkansas is a high school there, and he says, I want it to be integrated, which means it's not going to be just white students, it's going to be white and black students, so everybody can go to that school. And the school didn't like that, but you know what Eisenhower says? I don't care. I know what's right, and I'm going to make it happen. So the National Guard, he sends in the National Guard, and that school is integrated. And so he's letting everybody know, everybody's made equal, and I'm going to make sure they know that. Because, if you don't, I'm going to send in troops. While the Bay of Pigs did start planning at the end of his presidency, that wasn't him. Some people blame it for it, but really he doesn't have anything to do with the Bay of Pigs. We should really just focus on his many different accomplishments. He ended the Korean War. He started NASA. You could credit him with making the office that made the internet. The largest economic boom and prosperity this country has ever seen was on Eisenhower's watch. He integrated public schools, giving equal rights to all students in a public school in America. Whew, that was tough, that was hard, but we did it. We ranked all the presidents from George Washington to George H.W. Bush. Thanks for enjoying this. We're going to work on more content as soon as we can. But in the meantime, take it to rewatch all the episodes. They were a lot of fun to make, and we hope you liked them. But keep subscribing, keep liking, and keep sharing. We need to fill up the subscriber count. But thanks again, and stay awesome.